And to our online guests, thank you for being here. I just want to remind you, those of you joining us virtually, that you also can participate and send in questions through the chat. So it would be great to hear from you. This is for our final panel discussion today. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you all had a nice break, and also probably you all got a chance. I hope you all got a chance, for those of you here, to visit the Innovation Hub, which just opened last week. We had a very interesting exchange among different groups for the marketplace of ideas. We'll continue some of those discussions here. So we now, it's been a very stimulating past days here. Before the break, Arndt Huzar led us through the marketplace of ideas. So we were sharing ideas, boosting the engagement, knowledge, capabilities, service lines, and partnerships on data for ADB operations. So before we move to the DigitalXADB SUMMIT event, and panel discussion, let's hear first from Thomas Abel, Director, Digital Technology for Development Division at the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department, for the opening remarks.
Thanks, Mitzi, and thanks everyone for joining. So as you know, that this year we launched, or actually last year launched, the DataXADB program. And this is the capstone for that program. And I will just take through kind of a summary so that kind of to get everybody on the same page. So the idea of DataXADB is that at the heart of digital intelligence is data. And we know data is driving all these big AI models. And all of our governments are struggling with how to deal with data, both in terms of using it, but also privacy and security. And so we wanted to really have a program with our partners in government to understand how we can increase our support within the capabilities of ADB. So the series basically started, this episode, or this edition of it, was 3 leading ecosystems and partners, Singapore, India, and Korea. And we had really leading edge partners supporting us. In Singapore, we had National University, we had IIIT in Hyderabad, and we had the Incheon City in Korea as partners that basically helped us connect with those ecosystems in these leading organizations. And then we also had 14 of our development member country participants listed here from across the different regions. And luckily we had several of you coming for this capstone. We thank you for participating, which is a big commitment, but also coming here for the capstone, which is another big commitment, because we really would never have been able to make this a success without the participation. So we also had significant participation across the 3 programs, 58 staff, 35 clients, and 65 presenters from leading organizations in each of those ecosystems. And each one of these was not the same program. We had deep dive topics that were relevant to the ecosystem partners and relevant to the DMCs that we invited. So in Singapore, the deep dive topics were smart city, smart nation, and cybersecurity. And in India, we had digital public infrastructure and digital agriculture. And in Korea, we had digital infrastructure and climate data. So all of these are very relevant, and it gave us a breadth of experience that would not have really worked if we had just tried to cut and paste the program. And then we also, as you saw in the Innovation Center, we had insights drawn out. It wasn't just a learning event or a capacity building event, but it was really us looking at what ADB can do in partnership with our DMCs to advance the the use of data in development. So we had the sensing exercise, looking at opportunities, challenges, risks, and assets, and then we had action ideas, which some of those were presented this afternoon. And Arndt and Joe put together this very nice graphic. It's not readable here, but it represents how all that data came together as this web of opportunity presented to us and our DMCs. And this will help guide us in terms of prioritizing and looking at where these ideas come together. And then the summit that we're having today basically builds on the 3 programs, bringing together this marketplace of ideas, and now with the summit to basically bring it all together. And the idea is that this program will not end. We will take these ideas forward as partnership ideas, which we've developed so many with our DNC partners, but also that we will envision future versions of this program. We want to take that insight and any ideas you have on how we can do that effectively, because this is something that will carry forward. We have even with 3 events, we still have a fairly small representation of all of our DMCs and all of our staff, so we want to continue this. So with that, I want to hand it to Arndt Mitzi then, and to take us to the next phase of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, and congratulations in getting all that together. A very productive few meetings. So thank you for sharing everything that's happened over the past few, I don't know how long it's been, this journey with all of you together. Now we'll talk more about that in the panel discussion at this capstone, and this will be moderated by Arndt Husar, who's a Senior Public Management Specialist at the Digital Technology for Development Division at the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department.
This afternoon. I should be wearing my hat, which we just had at the marketplace. This symbolizes or stands for all the alumni, but I've already been asked whether these hats are available to anybody else, so please contact us. They are for sale at the exit. No, thank you, Thomas. It's really great to be having this gathering today. It's so important for us as people who've organized these, but also to all the people who came to share what we talked about. You saw the numbers. We're really just a fraction of ADB's staff that got the opportunity to go out there and do the sensing and engagement with our clients. So that fraction of people that now has better awareness, knowledge, connections, networks, needs to be communicating with the bigger community of staff. And that's what this summit is really all about. So we have a fairly small audience in this room, but we also have online participants. Our participants who came from the DMCs, from the resident missions, are able to follow this online. So welcome to those of you who are joining us online. Now, for this first segment of the summit, we've asked 3 of the alumni to share the action ideas grouped in 3 themes. And the 3 themes that we were able to condense out of the 7 ideas that we conceptualized are, number 1, digital transformation as a service. Theme 2, capacity to deliver. And theme 3, data at, data for, and data with ADB. And these themes will be presented by, please come to the stage, Jazira Asanova from South Asia Regional Department, Naveen Twarakavi from our Agriculture and Food Security Sector Group, and Madhavi Pandit from our Economic Research Department. Please come to the stage. And they all prepared a few slides that they'll use to present their ideas to you. So I'll just hand over to Jazira for the first presentation. Please just let me know when you'd like me to click.
Sure. Thank you very much. And the topic that we talked about in our groups, and I would like to present today, is digital support as a new service line. And just a quick background that actually ADB has been supporting digital technologies under sector-specific approaches However, the pace of digitalization is such that the clients are coming with different requests, and I think there's scope to go beyond sector support in digital technologies. And we all know that digitalization is one of the mega trends, together with climate change and ADB's support for private sector development. So rather than looking at digitalization as a kind of its own vertical, we think that as a mega trend, as a vertical, we need to look at it embedded or interlinked with other verticals that we're working on, such as climate change and private sector support. Now, we've talked about leapfrogging. However, experience of some of our countries in our region, for instance, Korea, show that support for digitalization actually is kind of long-term and requires a lot of coordination and cooperation. And therefore, we do think that digital support can become an independent service line. And there's a couple of entry points. And when we think about service lines for digital, we think that we need to consider a maturity curve of our own capabilities. And therefore, we think that a good entry point is upstream on the analytical support. So we've got advisory services, TA support. We have, of course, PPP advisory services, benchmarking knowledge products. And while we're working on those lower hanging fruit, we can also engage midstream on capacity development. And this can happen at individual organizational level to improve their performance in terms of integrating digital solutions and platforms, but also systemic, perhaps at a whole of government level. And the other service line is downstream, which is our investment projects. And we do think that there is scope for ADB to have lending support for standalone digital. It's probably a few years down the road, but what we can do now is integrate strong digital components into upcoming projects, for instance, on data centers and other topics that we haven't addressed yet as an organization. And of course, we do have instruments like PBL, and then results-based lending, and then sector development program to actually expand this support and work on regulatory frameworks and policies. And the last service line is something that we already have a seed for, which is sandbox support. But I think much more can be done, and we're thinking of prototyping digital solutions for our clients, taking it to scale, and piloting it out, and also helping our clients with innovation challenges, and really, bringing in innovative players to this area, and being a catalyzer. So let me pause there.
Thanks, Jazeera, for sharing what was actually a very large cluster of ideas. And if you'd like to find out more, please let us know. We have a fact sheet also for every one of the ideas that's being presented. Over to Naveen.
First of all, thanks to all of my team who worked on capacity to deliver. And I think on the knowledge, okay. So first thing we considered was knowledge management and capacity development at ADB. And we talked about mapping of digital technology expertise, having a community of practice, boosting the knowledge and the attitude and skills of project officers. But these are pretty, I would say, generic, maybe across other technical aspects as well. But I think let's dig into why this is important. I think this is more the critical question. So if you think about traditional operations, they are largely driven by a primary sector, right? And what we are increasingly realizing, we realized even before, was that the best solutions, the most effective solutions lie at the intersections of multiple sectors. And discovery of those nexuses, often tends to be, out of experience, out of a unique kind of a discovery, right? So today, the digital and the data capabilities provide us to systematically discover these nexuses. So I think this is the first point that we want to bring together, and that's that the most effective solutions lie at the intersections of multiple sectors, and I think data can essentially make us help us bring that out. So as an example, we can use data solutions for example, internal discovery. As an example, we have all of these RRPs, that come out of projects. There is a way to systematically pull that information out and see how different processes interact with each other. Today we have such capabilities. We can visualize our projects in a much more effective way. That's another aspect. This would essentially lead to project officers coming up with better approaches. So one example I would like to bring in agriculture, which is what we are doing in, is what we call as knowledge graph, where we are trying to pull in various aspects of agriculture, cross-link them with each other, and then see how a project can be designed such that you can actually have the highest rate of success in many ways. So that's one thing. The external discovery is also an equally important one. So we have a lot of information coming in, especially with climate change happening. We need to be, our data and information needs to be, the latest. So for that to happen, again, data and digital solutions can become very effective. One last thing in the external discovery I would like to mention is empathy. We have to connect to our most vulnerable and the most significant beneficiaries. And if you look at our projects, we kind of probably miss that a little bit. So we need to, for example, if I'm developing an agriculture solution, we can use concepts like design thinking to go and talk to farmers. We did that in Bangladesh as an example. We did that in Tajikistan, and you can the results are there to see. So we would like to see how we can scale that going forward. Now, the second aspect we talked about was boosting digital operations, and this would require essentially, it's kind of blurry, but I'll explain. So I think there are different players in our project cycle, right? We have from country director to project officer to risk management specialist, so we have various role players. We need to build the capacity based on their needs. We cannot have one size fits all, capacity building, because that wouldn't really play out. So I think that was another aspect that we talked about. The next thing we talked about was, finding, we look at three principles: setting a vision strategy for innovation, creating an innovation culture, and improve process management. And then we talked about how that would fit in with regards to knowledge and expertise, curiosity and engagement, and registry and documentation. So we talked about that as well. We can explain that later, offline. And last but not the least, I think linking to the climate agenda. Now the thing with digital is linking it to the climate agenda it doesn't have to be forced. It's actually quite organic. So I'm just giving an example of agriculture. So in the first column, you have various digital solutions, and on the rest of the columns, you have various applications, right, which would lead to different kind of climate outcomes. Now you can see that even if you're not able to read, you can see that there are a lot of technologies that would offer us the solutions, and they would automatically have some climate outcomes. So this is just an example in agriculture, but you can now visualize this in other sectors as well. And I think that's an exercise that we can do and ensure that that the climate agenda is supported going forward. And we talked about other actions as well. One of the things we talked about was, can we have a digital envoy, right, as a champion and a spokesperson, right? Because in between the four shifts of norm, is there a digital shift underneath that we can kind of pull out and make it happen? It's an interesting thing to think about. We also talked about incubation and acceleration, because we need government, our stakeholders, and our project officers to come together and co-design solutions. Right? Do we have a safe space for that? Where we can actually make this happen is something to think about. And then last but not least, there was also discussion about trust fund financing. One example was to have a catalyst fund, for developing ecosystems, so on and so forth. But another interesting parallel was drawn to IFCAP. In IFCAP, we are providing guarantees to climate, heavy projects now. Can we do similar thing for digital? Because digital tends to be, generally speaking, not as heavy on the financing side, but they're very effective. On the development index, they are very high. So can we have some kind of a guarantee mechanism for that? Something to, again, for us to ponder. So this is what we had from our team. Thank you.
Thank over to Madhavi.
We know that good data and analytics play a key role in meaningful policy making, efficient allocation of resources, and effective public service delivery. Today, digital technology makes richer and deeper uses of data possible. So, for example, studying economies that are traditionally data sparse, or understanding sectors and populations that are traditionally data underrepresented, or enhancing work streams that traditionally are not data-driven. Now, while we have made some important strides, there are still many gaps in our data ecosystem, which is the driving force for this theme: data at ADB, data for ADB, and data with ADB. So during the different cohort meetings, 4 topics emerged as part of the discussions. I'll just go through each quickly. The first is data partnerships. Partnerships are very important for advancing both traditional as well as big data analytics. Partnerships with data companies, technology providers, data science and subject experts, and stakeholders, governments, communities, and of course institutions like we all met at the various DataX cohorts. For example, and ITD colleagues know this, a new initiative that ADB has joined is the Development Data Partnership, DDP, which is a collaboration between international organizations and the private sector for applying data science to development challenges. Now, DDP is one example of an increasing and emerging trend, and there is definitely a lot of scope for multidisciplinary work in collaboration with our partners, but within a solid framework, which includes not just the data side, but the legal side, technology side, etc. The second is data platforms. Data is everywhere, both within ADB and outside. But high quality, trustworthy data that is easy to use and access in one place, let's say, is very important for good analytics. Again, I want to give an example where the research department plans to create a data portal which integrates data from all its flagship publications for easy access and visualization by users. And I think there are other initiatives like Data Exchange Platform that have started. But I think participants were very enthusiastically talking about the importance of a central repository for structured project data to be able to reuse, share, and do analytics, because right now they are very dispersed. So this is a key area for action. Another, I think with proper frameworks, what we can also achieve is the one you see on the right side panel, which is data-driven decision-making and design. And you can see a list of action points that participants highlighted. I just want to mention the last one, the lighthouse approach, because we have another example from ERDI under the theme of data with and for and at ADB, that is working with the East Asia department as well as Korean counterparts to develop an integrated government data system in Mongolia, from which we plan to build capacity in the development of indicators with regard to economics and climate change. But in general, across the bank and in ERDI, of course, over the last few years, we have been identifying data that can be used for better measurement of development indicators, for monitoring and tracking socioeconomic conditions, and for impact assessment of major events like COVID-19, disasters, etc. So this slide here just shows some examples of country case studies that have been developed as a proof of concept in a specific situation for a specific country. But the idea is that once effectiveness is demonstrated, innovative projects like this can be scaled up, but within a supportive and transparent ecosystem. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. So these were the brave 3 that stepped forward after some arm twisting to present the ideas. These are themes, right? 3 themes, but underneath you find 7 ideas. Please, we will share after this event the 7 fact sheets, and these are not ready, cooked, and done ideas. We need to keep working on them, refine them. But if you're interested in collaborating with any of the team members, please let us know. We'll facilitate the further work on this. Okay, this was just the introduction. After this, there's a panel, so I'll hand over to Mitzi to introduce our panelists.
Over here. I'll begin with Sanjay Anandaram, who is the Executive Board Member of Modular Open Source Identity Platform, or MOSIP, and the Ambassador of iSpirit India. Thank you, Sanjay, for being here. We're also joined by Nita Pokrail, who is the Director of the Pacific and Southeast Asia Water and Urban Development Sector Office of the Sectors Group. Thanks, Nita, for being here. We're also joined by Jyotsana Varma, who is the Country Director at ADB Cambodia. Thank you as well for being here, Jyotsana. We're also joined by Winfried Wicklein, who is the Director General at Southeast Asia Department. Thank you for being here, Winfried. And we have one more, correct? We have one more, Nurses Yeretsian, who is the Head of Information Systems Agency of Armenia and the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Armenia. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to our panelists. And now I'll hand you back over to Arnd to kick off the panel discussion.
Thank you, and it's nice to have somebody else introduce the panel and me, of course, instead of doing this myself. So thank you, Mitzi. What a panel, and I'm gonna switch to that mic in a minute, but just to say, the reason for combining these different insights, as you can see from just the designations, the functions that they're currently carrying out in ADB and outside, is to get both the inside view from thought leaders and senior management in ADB, and also a little bit of the outside view. But to kick us off, I'll start with the inside view, so our guests can hear a little bit how you react. So maybe I'll start first with Vinny. From what you heard just now, you basically oversee the work of the regional department, and you heard the ideas from our alumni. How does this resonate with what you have ahead of you in terms of strategy for the region, and what ideas stood out to you maybe from what was said?
Tom and Arnd and colleagues in bringing digital onto the agenda and very much on top of the corporate agenda. So that's fantastic. Congratulations. In many ways, I don't know if you have had in the past such a week-long, almost a week-long event, culmination event. I think that just speaks for itself. And you know, you can see it in all our corporate strategies. You can see it in all our country strategies. How much digital, how much is there? Maybe a step back from the country perspective. So I'm covering Southeast Asia for by way of introduction. Our countries in Southeast Asia, which is a very dynamic region, there's huge demand out there. There has been huge demand out there for the last, decade plus, and we have done a lot of work for the last decade plus. But now with 4IR and now increasingly AI, these super fast and always faster accelerating developments, I think there is huge demand for basically for support by ADB and by others. I don't think the demand from ADB is any technical. I don't think really that countries are looking to us for technical solutions. They're looking for the private sector. I think what they're looking for is also not our money, by the way. Funding, I think what they're looking for is ADB as an honest broker, trusted facilitator, an organization that by design, by our DNA, brings together governments cross-border, within the region, within sub-regions, brings together private sector players with governments, is trusted to put together policy frameworks, technical master plans, trusted to have an independent review of feasibility studies and what have you. And then on the financing side, as a trusted partner who may come in with strategic investments that then catalyzes huge investments. And we are talking huge investments, right? Every country is teeing up. So how can we go about it as ADB? How can we set ourselves up better? And we saw all these fantastic ideas. It's now to your question, Arnd. I think there are three levels that we can and should come in, and as we are coming in and we are teeing ourselves up to come in, One is on the upstream level. There is huge interest, as I mentioned, on support for the policy side. Countries are dealing with these developments, how to integrate them into their national development planning. There is, on the midstream level, there's a lot of demand in putting projects together, in structuring them, in bringing public and privates together into structured partnerships. And then downstream, there is the strategic investments that I mentioned that ADB is looked at, bringing together, maybe de-risk investments in risky country markets, etc. I don't know whether I should, how many times I have a chance to speak, but just one thought that I listened to the colleagues just now. How do we get about go about it? We have in our project cycle we have I think we digital all our in Southeast Asia, all our country strategies have digital as a priority. That's before the project cycle starts, right? That's the country strategy time. But then in the country programming, that's the chance, and I'm also looking at the digital team and at all programming teams, that's the chance where you can get, or we can get, core digital projects into our country programs, right? That's your broadbands and what have you, right? Whether sovereign, non-sovereign, doesn't matter. And then at the concept stage, one step further in the project cycle, that's where we can mainstream digital through all the sectors and alongside climate change, alongside the PSD shift, etc. So there are various entry points that we could look at. Just looking at whether maybe I leave it here, maybe I'll have a chance later again. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Vinny. And I think this reflection on us as a trusted partner came out very strongly in our mapping. So if you saw the space of ideas and findings that we came up with basically during these events, we were mapping them literally with Post-its on the wall. And the group around our trust and brand name and so on was always very big, right? Big asset of ADB. But when we went into, are we ready to deliver? There was a lot of hesitation still. So a lot of the conversations amongst the participants were about, okay, what do we really have and where do we need to get better? And hence a lot of the conversations on the ideas are about strengthening our own capabilities so that this trust is matched with implementation capacity.
Can I just very briefly I'm actually not so worried about our own capabilities. We don't have hordes of technical experts or data scientists in the building, but it would be great if we have them, and we should ask for it, but we also, the reality is we don't have them at the moment, and if they come in, they trickle in. But we can do a lot with our current capacities. We can with the PSD shift, for example. I give you one example. Just today we had contract negotiations with, on data centers, right? And you guys are involved and in helping us. We can get experts to do survey of the needs and demands and investment opportunities for data centers in the region, and we get the experts in, and then we get this stuff rolling, right? And then we go through the sectors, right? So we can do a lot. So I wouldn't be worried and not do anything just because we don't have 100 digital experts like yourselves, right? We can do stuff.
Super. Jotsana, here you have it. Your DG is encouraging you to go out there and talk to the government and get those projects going. You participated in our India event, and you're here now again for the country forum, but you also have in the audience one of the ministers of state from Cambodia for Post and Telecom. So there's clearly an opportunity, I want to say, to do something with it. How do you feel about this now, where you're at today? Are you ready? Can we get going together?
Yes. Thank you so much for including me in this panel, and thank you also for including me in the India event. And I think my main takeaway from India was this: the huge power that there is in harnessing data. We learned from experts such as Sanjay the kind of work that is afoot in India, And I also had the honor of accompanying a delegation from Cambodia, from the Ministry of Economy and Finance. And we all went alongside to Hyderabad, and we had very interesting discussions with the Secretary of State, Jayesh Ranjan, there. And he really put it to us how this ecosystem has developed not by accident but by design, and the role of sovereign public sector financing in developing this ecosystem and putting in the bricks and mortar, if you will, for digital public infrastructure, and then how the whole thing has cascaded, and and we also saw how people are at the heart and center of these innovations, and how the speed of services has increased, the benefits of farmers, we saw benefits to farmers, we saw the agri stack, and I think another thing is this whole flip to innovation, just on the basis of the digital public infrastructure. So coming to Cambodia, we discussed a lot with the government, and I do know that Secretary of State Khop Makara he spoke earlier at the event, and so he did come to Manila to this event. So in Cambodia, even though there is no base digital public infrastructure in place just as yet, but I really feel that the conditions are ripe, because they have made several investments in, let's say, there is not a unique identity in place, but there is a Khmer ID, which is a subset, but it can lead to a bigger thing. There is a Bakong payment system, which is a peer-to-peer payment system that's there. There is a Cambodia data exchange. It's not yet connected to government services, but it's there. So there are several bits and places, and I think it's just that moment of catalyzing it into putting base digital public infrastructure there, and then that could. And on to DG's encouragement, well, we have been working, and SY is there in this room, who is the main architect of the various digital interventions that we have had in the projects that we have. So maybe if I can give you a few small examples of where we are already working. For example, we have done some, and these are very small interventions through technical assistance. We have a $2 million technical assistance that is ongoing in Cambodia. And we worked in the social sector registry, for instance, the various databases. So this small that we brought along, very useful. We are working for the land management system, and that's still a work in progress. We are trying to put together the digital infrastructure required for this piece. We have been working for long in public service delivery. In fact, you will see in our pipeline that moving forward, we will bring digital public service delivery in our lending investment. It will be a huge component. So we are really, I feel that Cambodia is a little bit ahead of the curve. And while we are looking at data centers with the Ministry of Posts and Telecom, which is the focal for digital, we have been working with Ministry of Agriculture and with the Ministry of Resources, and have developed data centers through existing projects. So a lot has been going on. This is on the sovereign side. And on the non-sovereign side, we do have ADB Frontier, which is bringing in, which is supporting small ticket investments in businesses that use digital technology. So a lot has been going on, but I do take the point that now that we are preparing the CPS, and with digital really powering the two shifts of climate and private sector, we hope to be able to actually build a master plan with the government for creating digital public infrastructure. So we hope that our discussions will bear fruit and moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxana. And I think we can confidently say, when you peel off the label of, country office in Nepal or Cambodia, when we started to hear from our DMC counterparts and our resident missions about what was already going on, you do have something to build on. We're not starting from nothing. Now, Nita, your sector has actually gone ahead and already initiated a lot of things on digital. You might want to share a little bit about that. And yet you saw in the presentation, we didn't make water as one of our focus areas in the recent events. So maybe the opportunity to do something with you on in the future. We did pick these sectors more based on what we were seeing as potential counterparts in the ecosystem we were visiting. We also felt that we were actually not talking so much about, let's say, agriculture. We were talking about the data story. So what we were learning was more about how a sector, any sector, can do better with using data. And I think that's also largely what your initiatives are about. Can I just ping you on that, and if you can share a little bit?
Thank you. Yes, we have rags to riches stories in our sector. When Thomas's team and Arn's team, though there's so few of them, I used to be their neighbor when I was chief of water sector group. You wouldn't imagine how few they are with the amount of work they produce and the momentum they've got going on this agenda, so congratulations. They did a report looking at our past 10 years, different sectors. I think 2019, right? Yeah, and 2018. And we were the lowest, less than 5% uptake in water sector. In ADB, water sector is the investment are managed and planned through two sector offices now. One is the agriculture natural resources, who look at upstream and water resources, agriculture and downstream, the sea management, coastal management. Then the water and urban sector office, which is ours, looks after the water supply, sanitation, intercity, flood control. So between these two groups, we have a really large water portfolio. Averaging, this year we would cross $3.5 billion annual commitment. Last year, the year before, $2.5 billion. And in some countries, we are really, like in Pacific, where I currently work, we are in all 14 of our Pacific DMCs. So we were at less than 5% last 10 years. Last 5 years, somehow the might of 300 ADB staff, and I agree with Vinny, none of us are digital experts. 300 headquarter-based staff, RM staff, their enthusiasm, their drive, constant awareness, and it goes into capacity data, multi-pronged approach. We upped it, the entire ecosystem rose with the help of everybody else. 2021, 2022 lending, if you average digitalization, nearly 70%. We are number one in the sectors. Rags to riches story, without any dedicated water sector digital expert. So it can be done. That's the good story. Now, how do we go about it? And again, I want to bring it to the reality is we are in infrastructure sector. I'm an engineer. We still use 100-year-old British, American, Indian standards in writing. I kid you not, 100-year-old. We are very shy to try anything. You ask, they say, let us just put this pipe and build first. We will supply water, then we think of digitalization, shall we? This is where we are every day. The average age in my sector, I'm over 50, is 60 plus. I kid you not. We have data. So, and they ask the assistants to type as they speak. And they're really mortified. It's so much fear in our sector. Seriously. So, can somebody help me attend Zoom meetings? We constantly hear that. So again, the two themes, capacity and data, they're interwoven. Data is data. It only becomes usable information with the capacity. To transfer that data into usable information and give that as a tool, you really have to build massive capacity. So in our sector, and I give one or two usable examples, in 2016, 17 in India, we were processing this rural water supply project, and kilometers and kilometers of pipes, similar in Pacific, all isolated. The overhead water tanks, you can imagine, spilling water, we are losing a lot. And they are manning it 24/7 to take care of it. So we said, Everybody has, and they said it's too hard, too difficult, too much. Everybody has a mobile phone, doesn't matter 2G, 3D, whatever you have. You put a $15 level sensor, $15. It's so readily available everywhere these days. All you transmit is one indicator, the level data, through your 2G, 3G, 4G, whatever you have. You are saving that cost of having housing, manning, whatever it is. Do cost-benefit analysis, it's huge, huge, huge saving. But you have to be patient with the government and your counterpart who are in their 60s, who get the assistance to type their log sheets. Same in the O&M places, they really want paperwork. The SOPs are what the British and the American standards wrote. And so that patience, humility needs to kick in. It took us 2 years, but now 66 gram panchayats in West Bengal in India have smart water systems. The client, Public Health Engineering Department of West Bengal, has real-time data GIS mapping of what gets built, what gets updated. But it took years to and they invested a lot, it's a norm. There's a lot of data privacy issues. They would not want anything in cloud for multiple reasons, and we have to respect government's laws. We don't have regulations yet to really enforce. Some of the things, again, we found, and this is, again, multiple times it comes to say, who will vet it? Again, I love giving examples with my phone. You are being iPhone 7. Is it going to be 8, 9, 10, 11, this is 14? How much it's gonna cost me? What is the hidden cost of the software and the hardware I buy? Can I afford it? Can I sustain it? All of our clients, every water utility is asking that. And we are, I don't know, it's unknown. It is as a mind-boggling quagmire out there that we have to help them demystify and understand before we really bring it home. One last thing before I hand over, Naveen mentioned about this cross-sectoral nexus. It was really wonderful to hear that. Again, upstream, we need to do a lot, but when it comes to implementation, midstream and downstream, we are totally fragmented. Groundwater is managed by one entity, one department, surface water one. Cities have to do something else, somebody else. Cross-state-wise, we cannot share data. Cross-ministry, so the silo, again, practicalities, the idealist thing would be, yes, we find that, but the practicalities are, again, we have to ground up from downstream all the way upstream, looking, again, tracing the capacity trail, because there's a lot, and again, one other thing we learned, we did a lot. We brought 118 water sector digital solution providers in 2021 and 22 through virtual connected. We synthesized learning from that. We synthesized learning from our implementing agencies. And again, digital solution providers are providing solutions at their own pace. They're not really matching with the capacity, especially of our Asian DMCs, what pace and speed they need. And we're really trying to put the square in the round. So again, from the solution providers, there is a lot of cross-learning of the pace, the incrementality that is needed from our DMC perspective, and tailor those services based on that. So I'll stop here, but of course I have many, many stories. This is my pet topic. I've been on it since 2015, partnering with, and partnership, yes, when European Space Agencies came here in 2015, I was the first to say, take my project. So I love it, but we will get there. Again, rags to riches story, 5% to 70, but we need to go a long way still. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita, and how quickly you've been able to boost capabilities by really bringing in also external expertise. So thank you for sharing that. Now I want to switch over to the client perspective, to a DMC perspective. And we've invited our partner from Armenia to talk a bit about the reality there and how it maybe matches up with the stories that you're hearing this week about both the ambition that ADB has, but also maybe the readiness that you see at the country level. And Armenia is here also because they were the participants. They participated in our Singapore cohort with 3 very senior delegates, the Vice Minister from the Ministry of High Technology, a representative from the Deputy Prime Minister's office, and a representative, a very high-ranking representative from the central bank. So it was a very high-level delegation, the most vocal, I would say, in the workshop, very engaged. And then subsequently, they invited me to do a mission. So we had immediate follow-up. And now you're here. So why is that happening? And how are we making it, the conversation, stick with Armenia? Can you tell us a bit more about what's happening there and how?
Thank you very much. First, let me thank you for this organization and warm welcome, and especially you for hard work and putting all this panel together. I didn't participate, but I've been aware, and our guys attended. I just read all the presentations, followed up with the Singapore's senior minister on cybersecurity, and a few other things basically. Therefore, I'm aware of the endeavor, and reflecting on what I've heard, the three directions like digitalization as a service, capacity building to meet the demands, and data. And I saw lots of outputs from the ADB side. But the other side of the mirror is what is happening on the ground in the member countries. And I'll present our perspective. This is where the difficulty comes in, and most probably you'll find out that you don't need AI experts, digital experts, etc. You need simply to decide to change the mindset, the way you approach, and this is what we are struggling in Armenia. This digital transition has been, if I put a nice positive story, I can go for 3 hours of positive story about Armenia's digitalization, how many services are online, digital identity, one of the first after Estonia, etc., etc. But then if you go deep down what you have achieved in terms of changing people's lifestyle, improving businesses and people's day-to-day life, from that perspective, the cost does not justify basically the outcome. And this is the risk if you think through the input and some nice kind of intervention tools perspective. One other thing that we found out, basically we asked the Estonians to come, have a helicopter view, and advise us, where is the problem? Why aren't we are committed, we spend money, but why we are not moving? And then they had a clear verdict. They said, guys, it's easy to write strategies. Simply somebody sits as a minister, copies from internet information in internet becomes cleverer over time, your strategy becomes cleverer. But where are your capacities? You don't pay attention to the capacities. But capacities is not something you put people in classroom or bring high top caliber people to teach. Capacity building is like you take one or two real things that are transformative, do it, and then prove yourself that you are capable of changing things, then the strategy will come. This has also changed our mindset in terms of cybersecurity, because initially we were thinking cybersecurity strategy, anybody comes, like World Bank hired Oxford, Harvard, whatever, top experts came, you have to have a strategy. And they write the same thing. I found the paper from 2015, still relevant. Nobody moved anything around. Although on a paper, lots of things have happened, basically. And then we, consulting with real people who really started a national CERT and cybersecurity centers, etc., they said, what matters, you find the first 5 people that could build up this collaborative environment with the private sector, bring together all the thinkers in the cyberspace, then they will advise you what is the right path for Armenia to build strong cybersecurity capabilities. Then you build the capabilities, then comes the law, sets up the mandate, then strategy will follow. It's the opposite direction because of serious failures, basically have to teach us that it's not only your imagination, you have to get the right people that are ready to sacrifice and move things basically forward. In that context, what is important though, vision is critical. How you define the future. In our case, we have agreed at the very top level, and then everything started a renewed effort. When we went to the government, We said, look, this cryptocurrency is opening up the finance space, financial innovation is a threat to the Armenia's financial sovereignty. We may lose our currency and tax base, which is critical. We may use tax base because over time, people, all of Armenians may have, they are well educated, may have accounts on Amazon or eBay, etc., bank accounts or credit cards from somewhere else. I lived in DC, I can live in the US now, just physically being in Armenia. And all the Armenians could move in there, you only get the poverty, and this is a real problem for the ADB to think about. Because poverty would become severer if people would move from one jurisdiction to another as the technology opens up, this open data, etc., means that you lose your sovereignty, not because you want it or you change your laws. People themselves vote with feet, and then they move to another jurisdiction, then you are stuck with problems, basically. And then we went to the government, we were persuasive in a way, and told them there are three things that are common, we should do it together. And those are critical in achieving digital transformation. Number one, cybersecurity. Number two, identity, which is key to cybersecurity. And number three, smart contracts, which requires data, which is unique, basic, and data for a purpose, not data just you collect data for anything, but for the purpose. And then we articulated the vision that data is the wealth, and we heard this morning somebody say that data is the next oil. But we defined what kind of data. Open and data available as a service. Data in your server means nothing. Data available for private sector, for the others, to build upon this data different applications. That's the useful data, because data belongs to a person. And person should own the data. Government or private sector should be controlling or operating this data. The government should not own the data. Per event, then basically satisfaction will be pretty low. The other point is when we talk about e-society, we talk about engaging the private sector. We keep talking PPP. PPPs are necessary in this field. Those are sophisticated. Currently, I'm leading with Ernst & Young the PPP on our identity cards, physical enablers, identity cards and passports. It's really complicated. But we need to talk about different way of organizing our next e-society. Government keeps its real role as a regulator and supervisor. The private sector operates, including this infrastructure. For example, our 10 banks and 3 telecom companies, all of them, have agreed to set up a company and provide the safest PKI infrastructure with identity, everything. We as a government are going to regulate in line with the European strict regulations and standards, basically. And they will invest $10 million in boosting this service, basically. The government did it. We issued 1.4 million cards because we mandated people, but only 60,000 use electronic signatures or electronic ID because trust is an issue. People have to trust. Therefore, trust, building next society based on trust is critical. And then I heard the trust in the context of a trusted partner, but I think the ADB also could serve the purpose like the European Union does for their member countries, making data and the systems interoperable between the countries. Providing through the advice or verification, certification, also ADB should not provide certification, but we have to train and create industry of auditors and certificate issuers that could prove the concepts or systems that 2 countries could freely exchange and insure, or a global insurance company, a Japanese or Chinese or American insurance company insures your identity system, this system that is exchanged between 2 countries. Then we don't worry, basically we transact as citizens and the private sector takes the risk through insurance. It's a measured risk basically where some kind of intervention could be through standards and then institution building. ADB could help this building this trust environment where data become important. And my last point I'll make on data, you shouldn't start thinking from data as economists. I'm an economist. You never start thinking through the data. You learn theory, you just crystallize what you want to achieve, build the model, then collect the data to utilize it. Many countries over time bureaucrats have asked data to protect their own kind of risks from the bureaucratic purposes, which doesn't improve services. Now we have to cut it back basically because the citizen becomes the owner of the data. And upon request with their identity, these data should be available anywhere, everywhere, whoever they want to give. There shouldn't be a restriction. And this requires lots of legal and regulatory framework, not technology. If you don't have legal basis for data, reuse of data, why this data is created, who is the owner of this data, who is responsible for the integrity of the data, collecting this data becomes rubbish. In 5 years, your service will be outdated, legacy issues come in, etc. You don't know where to store your data, but you don't know which data is critical as well. And there's one concept in terms of data that we put. One is the open data. That means bureaucrats have to persuade which data could be restricted. If they cannot explain, data should be open, available through the platforms, interoperability framework we call it. The other one wants the once-only principle. Like if at the birth I gave my name to the government should not ask my name, never again in my lifetime. This is a critical kind of check over improving the system. Otherwise, we will keep digitalizing, but people will not get the services as one kind of solution within a digital society. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Nerses. And clearly, I mean, Armenia, this was our experience. There's a lot of vision there. There's a strategy. There's a new institution, Information Systems Agency, which you head. Now, we also have a new CPS in Armenia. That's just being finalized. And as a member of the team, and finally, the end result is we have digital as a cross-cutting theme. But we're also seeing that there's this clear demand for some very key inputs to the country's ambition to digitalize government, society. And nurses and the country team are still struggling to figure out, okay, is there something, a case to be made to have a standalone investment? How would we, as the digital team, support the resident mission in doing so? Which teams need to be involved? So still a lot of discussion to be had. I want to get to the point that we can involve the audience, but Sanjay has been so patiently waiting. And I want to hear your perspective as someone who's a doer, who's been advising a lot of countries, partners to work with digital identity. But for the purpose of this discussion, tell us what you've been observing during the event in Hyderabad, during these few days here. Where do you see the opportunity for ADB to play a significant role in this space of digital transformation? You see a lot of different people, investors, private sector, you see the discussions that the Indian government has been leading in the G20 on digital public infrastructure. From all this, what is your advice of where we can play a significant role?
First, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for hosting me in Hyderabad and here. Thanks very much. So 2-3 quick points in the interest of time. And I'll just reiterate what was said by the previous speaker. Everyone has a vision until you get punched in the face, right? So I'm actually paraphrasing Mike Tyson, who said everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face, and that's reality. So at iSpirit, when we launched Aadhaar and from then on the entire India stack, the focus was on doing. It evolved as we started building. So the last 14 years, right? So today, everything from agriculture to drones to health to financial inclusion to lending to AI to logistics to e-procurement, you name it, is following the same set of principles. And that means that, so 2-3 points for ADB to ponder over and consider. First, we don't think of anything as a point offering. We think of it as an ecosystem, which means there are multiple layers that have to come into play for a final benefit to be delivered, which means you've got a technology layer, you have a legal layer, you have a governance regulatory layer, you have a policy layer, et cetera, et cetera. Second, again, as part of this ecosystem, there are multiple, let's say, people with specialized capabilities, experiences, and skills who have to be brought in at different points in time to enable the stack to get built. All the wisdom and capabilities does not need to reside within ADB, but you need to know who to go to, and more importantly, what questions to ask. And three, whenever they give you an answer, how do you know it's the one that you're looking at? That's the kind of capability you need to have. You don't need to understand coding, but I need to know whether this person understands software, and when they propose a solution, does it work for me, right? Which is at a second order abstraction. So you need to understand that. The third is which sort of ties in this ecosystem thing of this stack and being able to bring in the appropriate experts, is to have a set of accredited partners. And I was in a conversation earlier today, which is talking about a small DMC that might, or that is keen to implement an identity system. So how does one go about doing it? Who's the consultant? Who's going to fund it? Who's going to implement it? Who's going to provide training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Since ADB is the most trusted, credible player, and you're going to be the orchestrator of an ecosystem, you need to have a roster of accredited partners of all kinds, whether they're region-specific, whether they're sector-specific, whether they're domain-specific, and so on. So you know that, yes, I'm going to this part of the world, this is the size of the particular project. It's really a small country of, say, 50,000 people versus a 5 million population country. Therefore, what kind of capacity do I need? So I need to be able to calibrate the set of partners to the potential beneficiary. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what model I follow. It doesn't matter. What is my outcome metric? The outcome metric is that the beneficiary must benefit, which means the end user / citizen. All too often we get lost in the mechanics, we get lost in the modeling, right? We get lost in the way in which the different partners come together, and we lose sight of the fact that that individual has still not been able to access a $10 loan for the past 1 month, right? And that's the reality. And therefore, and what's called user-centric design, right? You have to design from that individual's scheme of things and design backwards. I'll give you a very quick example, 30 seconds. When we were designing a lending and a payments infrastructure in India, the design persona was this lady called Rajni. Rajni is the name of a vegetable vendor who sits on the road and sells vegetables. Every morning, she borrows 1,000 rupees from the local moneylender, goes to a wholesale market, buys vegetables worth $1,000, comes back to her station on the road, pays 10% interest per day, sells vegetables for $1,200, keeps 100 rupees for herself. That's the person for whom we designed it. How does she access a formal lending mechanism? Right now, this is an informal lending that she's doing by borrowing from this guy. Second, how does she become part of the payment mechanism? Because people come, pay her cash, she doesn't know what to do. Many a time, the local thugs come along, take the money, and so on. How do we improve her life? That was the design goal. And that is what led to all of this, right? A bank account, identity, payments, credit, and so on, right? So right now, keeping all this in mind, in the next 18 months, maybe 20 months, we'll have a situation where the design goal is under 30 minutes. A person like Rajni can avail a loan on her mobile phone. Her bank account will get credited with UPI, right, in under 30 minutes, right? So that's the design goal. So we are working towards making that happen. And so on, there are multiple use cases. But the point I'm making is that user-centric design will drive the entire process. Thanks.
Thanks, Sanjay. And I think you just endorsed kind of the approach that Armenia is also taking with the moments of life, organizing your just public services around these important moments. You also kind of alluded to a point that Naveen was making about the work they were doing in Bangladesh, talking to farmers. So there are some good practices and seeds of innovation that we have in our program. You also talked about the roster of expertise, which Nita has been working on. Part of her argument of why they've been able to scale delivery on digital was that she has actually onboarded lots of them in the space, and working with the very difficult clients can actually say, hey, I need somebody now, and I draw down on this framework contract and make somebody available quickly. So thank you for endorsing some of those that were. I want to open the floor. We have a lot more to talk about here, but the reactions from the audience. Is there anybody who would like to make a comment?
If you were to point out 3, 4 best practices from the private sector that we can embed in our sovereign, in our governments, like what would those be? For example, when we do a digital solution in private sector, we talk about fail early, fail fast, right? I mean, how does that translate in a government operation when they're trying to develop a digital solution? So any few things that a Google of the world or a Facebook of the world does that we can actually bring to the government, that would be helpful.
So I assume the question is for the private sector man on the panel, is Sanjay. Sanjay is from Bangalore. He's been very involved in the startup ecosystem there. So I'm going to pass the ball to Sanjay on this one.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to respond to in a meaningful manner. I mean, how do you embed private sector approaches within, let's say, a government or quasi-government thing? I think what we have learned, again, thanks to the India Stack story, is 3, 4 things. One, don't do it from within government. In other words, create a separate institution. I'll give you an example. You take our payments mechanism, right, UPI. It's owned by a not-for-profit company called National Payments Corporation of India, which is owned by the Central Bank of India and a host of other banks, right? Which means once it's set up as a Section 8 company, which is a not-for-profit company, the degrees of freedom that a company is able to get vis-a-vis a government department or a ministry effort is dramatically different. Who you hire, how much you can pay, the way in which you negotiate contracts, a host of sort of benefits accrue from it being a company. That's the first. Second is involving partners early on. What that means is no company does everything by itself, okay? There are all kinds of partners. Some who come in just for a project, some who are long-term, partners and so on. So what is the mode of partnering, right? How do you partner? Is it a success fee based? What kinds of partners will you have? Who selects the partners and so on? The only submission is that the person who's taking a decision must be given the operating freedom. You don't want a 400-page operating manual on how to select consultants and then you have a 20-person committee that takes a call. That's not going to happen, right? Which means that delegation of authority and power to the person who's taking a decision, which means you have to trust that individual. That person has the capability, the understanding, and the context within which to take a decision, right? Else, layering it. You see, what happens in government typically is that because it's public funds, you have this audit fear, you've got these questions in parliament and all of those kinds of things. So everybody is busy trying to make sure that they are not at fault, right? That's essentially the goal. But what happens is that end of the day, you have to be able to take action. And therefore the system must allow you to do that. There are cases where phenomenal stuff has happened within government and because of government, but those are really the anomaly, led by dynamic officers with a lot of ministerial support and so on. But outside of that, the single biggest thing I think is the institutional framework within which you would work. And related to that is the governance and all the rest of it. The quality of people in government is fantastic actually. What happens is that while at senior levels, as far as we have seen it, are excellent talent, but there's a dramatic drop-off in capability just after the senior level people. And it's consistent across departments, across ministries. No, absolutely no hesitation in saying it. And some of the examples that I can give you, you'll start wondering, how does things even happen?
Yes, Nita.
It's not my question, I'm not from private sector, but just adding to what Sanjay said, when we looked at what had gone right, where we also saw such an uptake in integration of, because all the solution providers are private sector, where government took them willingly in this very Neanderthal-like sector, sorry, my sector is very Neanderthal, is when there was a champion. That was number one factor. There was a champion where it did not matter if it came from some unrelated ministry, where they didn't wait for the rightness in that ministry per se. They picked whoever was the champion and went with that. And again, incentive mechanism. Really, when there is a clarity, there is an incentive. Again, we don't want to digitalize. People say, oh, everybody's digitalizing. It does bring resilience, inclusion, sustainability. Yes, we get that. We also get, like in water, early warning system, $1 spend $10 return, everybody gets that. But still, end of the day, what is it that driving them that they had to establish and find, and that drove and sustained? Otherwise, we saw lots of pilots, and they die after piloting. For it to sustain, what we saw was the champion, as Sanjay said, no matter where they came from, the champion who stayed and weren't moved after 8 months. But also that clarity in incentive mechanism, and then that, that drove, and we saw lots of private sector providing solutions for longer, more sustainable manner.
Yeah. So just let me add a couple of points. Clearly you need a champion, but the champion needs to be supported by the highest executive authority. Right. Now, number two is that typically in bureaucratic setups, the individual needs to have hierarchical rank, because if you're talking to somebody more senior than you, and that person doesn't do what they're supposed to do, it's very hard for the champion to be able to get that file to move, okay? So you need hierarchical rank. And this has been proven, and I'm speaking from my understanding of empirical evidence in India. National scale, impactful projects have all happened that way. The third thing is that there must be some legal backing of some kind, saying how is this person taking action without following all the 250 rules and regulations, okay? Because what most officers are scared because of audit, okay? And that becomes a big concern relating to budgets and not following process and due process and things like that. So these are some of the things to also keep in mind.
So in Armenia, I heard about a champion who once went to the prime minister and said, "Allow me to dream." I told you, nurses, I would use this sentence. He shared with us this one experience. So can you share a little bit about this leadership, creating a space for yourself to dream and to champion an initiative?
Yeah, thank you very much. There's one reform or big transformative thing that I can show as a proof is the Armenian pension reform. Went through reshuffling of governments, etc., but because the leadership and the concept was so well designed with private sector concept, like funds are managed by Amundi, which is #1 in Europe, and Ampega, which is subsidiary of Talanx, the largest German insurance company. Local banks and finance institutions didn't want to accept, but they didn't have the capabilities. They were not interested. It became political, through political intervention, reform was postponed, but they couldn't kill it because it was designed and implemented in a way they were already behind the curve. Before they understood they are losing the power, they were already behind the curve. Everything has happened. Therefore, the change agent, like I use champion, but change agent is something different, where what is lacking with change agents, how to calculate the cost of resistance. Because there is kind of line where if you are not careful, you have to live with that problem. Then somebody for a smaller problem can stop the entire big idea, basically. That's the most dangerous thing to change, to the change agent, rather than real enemy standing behind of you, because the change agent works with narratives. What is your narrative? And then if narrative works, you deliver after narrative, it moves to the next phase, basically. And in that sense, these smaller things that could become a hurdle that you didn't notice, you didn't pay attention, or you didn't engage the others, that's what kills the idea, basically. And in terms of transformation, for example, now I'm fighting with all the ministers. There was a discussion at our prime minister level, and we had this big debate. Because what the minister says, they say, okay, we need the software, just write the software. We just devoted money, capacity, etc. I fought back. I said, I'm going to work on enablers. You have to work with your constituents. But how to break this ice in terms of bringing a narrative which would resonate, because we are talking in front of our country's leader, and then we have to win the argument. I said, you have to work with your constituents, understand how you are going to change their life, then I'll digitalize it for you. Otherwise, I'll digitalize in a way you lose votes. And that's resonated. Okay? There are certain things, they have to win votes. They don't think when they get elected, in between they have to think about this. And digitalization is about a democratic process. Everything becomes transparent. Otherwise, we are not serious about digitalization. Then we better stop. And one of the important things in this change agent story is like you have to have some lines where you say, I cannot move further. Like for the pension reform, I had very strong scientific backing done by different scholars, and I read lots of papers, that if you save less than 10%, over time, the system will lose its credibility, people will never reach any coverage, and eventually the storyline will become fake. And then you'll lose the momentum in 10, 20 years. Because this reform, you are thinking in 30 years' time. And then we fought. Whenever people came with less, maybe gradually because it was a burden on the citizens, just you enter into their pockets, I said, no, if it's 10%, I'll go out and speak against this reform myself. This is how you just navigate the changes. Because if you do not get all these tipping points clearly defined, eventually you fail on the reform and you stand halfway, basically. This is critical. But in terms of designing services, I want to bring one difference between live event and design thinking. Design thinking is a tool to live event. Because like you can get the farmers, improve farmers credit experience, but if I take the farmers live event, like selling for profit, then the logistics business comes in. I can digitalize logistics. That she never goes to anywhere to choose. She could get a computer where she could choose, etc. A trust contract could come in between. that anything comes rotten, she just throws away and then get compensated, for example. The insurance companies could come in, etc. And it becomes the real ecosystem around it. Again, you cannot build everything at once, but the thinking process should be through the life event of that lady, because you can improve lending, but next day, like in the Armenian case, like every election, not this government before, and I was part of that government, wherever we went, they said, oh, we need natural gas in our houses, or water supply next to my house. And they do nothing, basically, they don't have income, etc. The government built this, and then whenever they started charging, they were not happy. Therefore, this, you have to understand what is their life experience. Going once a day for a water might be much better than fixing our other problem instead, rather than basically bringing gas for comfort without explaining your constituents that they are going to pay, and this is going to be costly for them, and they don't have any kind of income to pay for this. Those are things that could break the reforms, and then the private sector thinking is critical in terms of, I mentioned the voters, but for the private sector, the consumers. Like if they design and launch the products in the wrong way, they didn't talk to their customers, eventually they are going to lose.
Thank you, Narcis, and we've actually run out of time for the panel. So Vinny, that was smart that you got your points out in the very beginning. I wanted to pass the word back to you as one of our champions, because really this room is full of people who can make it happen. We have a lot of people who are here who want to work as change agents of this whole process, and we need champions in-house but also outside within our DMCs to work with us, guide us, and champion our stories and make it an even better partnership on digital. So thanks to the panel. Let's give them a round of applause.